They called her their daughter for 28 years, until the hospital asked them to sign one form. That's when they walked away, claiming she wasn't really theirs. Days later, they showed up in a luxury car, not with flowers or concern, but with a lawyer, demanding her inheritance. But they didn't know Avery had already woken up and left them a letter that would shatter the lie they had lived for decades. A story about betrayal, survival, and the quiet power of truth. What does it mean to be family? Is love real when it disappears the moment it's inconvenient? Stick around to see how one woman turned abandonment into liberation and made her voice impossible to ignore. If you've ever questioned what people would do when you're at your worst, this story will stay with you. And if it resonates, drop your thoughts in the comments. Like, share, or subscribe. It means more than you think. Avery Morgan had built a name for herself in Atlanta's crowded tech world, not by luck, but by force of will. From a modest apartment in Southside to co-owning a rising medtech startup, she was a self-made powerhouse. Yet in the eyes of Richard and Helen Montgomery, the couple who raised her, she was always slightly separate. Not less, not unworthy, just other. That otherness showed in small things. Christmas gifts a little less thoughtful, smiles that arrived a beat too late. But Avery had never stopped trying. Until the night of the accident, when the trying nearly killed her. The doctor spoke with the kind of solemn clarity that fills a room like smoke. She has a cranial fracture, 3 broken ribs, a collapsed lung. If she makes it through the night, she'll need surgery. He paused, waiting. Silence. Then the man, Richard Montgomery, adjusted his cufflink, like he was preparing for a boardroom pitch. And the costs? The question cut through the air. The doctor blinked, not sure he'd heard correctly. She's in critical condition. We're doing everything we can. But before he could finish, Helen Montgomery leaned in. Her voice was calm, rehearsed. She's not our biological daughter. The adoption was informal. We don't hold legal responsibility. The doctor's eyes narrowed. She listed you both as next of kin. Emergency contact. Richard gave a brief, cold smile. A misunderstanding. We're not obligated to authorize anything. What do you call it when 2 people stand at the edge of someone's life and choose not to reach? Not confusion, not shock, deliberation. That night, Avery wasn't just fighting for her life. She was being erased, one signature left blank at a time. And yet, somewhere beyond that sterile room, someone still saw her worth. Just not the people who claimed to love her. Nurse Danielle Harris had seen plenty in her 15 years working emergency at Atlanta General. Gang violence, overdoses, burn victims, stories that clung to her scrubs long after the shift ended. But this was different. Standing in the quiet hum of Avery's ICU room, Danielle looked down at the unconscious woman, wrapped in wires and tape. Beneath the swelling and bruises, she saw someone fighting hard, alone. She hadn't said much when the Montgomerys walked out. Just nodded tightly. But when the door closed behind them, something settled in her chest. Fury. Quiet, coiled, steady fury. She's not our daughter. The words echoed in her head like a slur. Danielle had heard cold-hearted things in her life, but never spoken with such composure. Not even a flinch. No tear, no tremble, just detachment. That night she stayed past her shift, pulled an extra chair into Avery's room, brought in her own playlist. Nothing too dramatic, just soft jazz, some old Lauryn Hill. "Hey there," she said softly, adjusting Avery's IV. "I don't know if you can hear me, but you're not alone." She wasn't expecting a response, and didn't need one. She simply refused to let someone die alone because a pair of polished monsters decided she was disposable. Each time Danielle walked in, she gave Avery updates, the weather, hospital gossip, even small victories, like the vending machine finally being restocked with real coffee. "Girl, I don't know who raised you," she chuckled once, "but I can tell they didn't finish the job. 'Cause walking away from someone like you, that's unfinished business." She checked Avery's chart religiously, asked questions, pushed back when something didn't look right. When the neurologist mentioned they hadn't located other family, Danielle stepped in. "She's got people," she insisted. "She works with a startup in Midtown. Check under business partners." That's how they found Samantha. Danielle was there the night Samantha rushed in, red-eyed and shaking. She handed over a signed authorization for surgery, then held Avery's hand like she'd never let go. Danielle didn't cry often at work. But when Samantha whispered, "I'm here now, okay? I've got you," the tears came fast, silent, not for what Avery had lost, but for what she might still gain. In a place where so many are forgotten, Danielle had made a simple choice. She stayed. She bore witness. And because of that, a life didn't slip away unnoticed. Sometimes family isn't who shares your blood. It's who refuses to walk out when the room turns dark. The first flicker of awareness came in fragments, like light through broken glass. A distant rhythm, steady and mechanical. Beeping. Then, voices. One low and clinical, another warm, casual, humming something off-key. Avery didn't know where she was or what had happened. But she knew one thing for certain. She was still here. Trapped, yes. Mute, motionless. But present. Somewhere beneath the layers of pain and sedation, her mind clung to that fact like a thread. "I know they say you can't hear us," Danielle murmured during a sponge bath, "but the research says otherwise. So I'm going to keep talking." She told Avery about the weather again, more storms rolling in, and about the cafeteria running out of banana pudding again. She played Sade that night, said it was her grandmother's favorite. Said strength didn't always shout. Avery wanted to move, to signal something, anything, but her body remained a locked room. The machine breathed for her. Her eyes refused to open. Her fingers ignored her commands. Yet inside she screamed. Then came pain. Real sharp pain. A burning in her ribs, the pressure in her skull. Time twisted in that state. Minutes stretched into days. But voices began to cut through the fog more clearly. Samantha's voice. Her business partner. Her friend. "They left you?" Samantha whispered, disbelief cracking her tone. "They really left you here to die." Danielle filled in the rest, the video footage, the doctor's report. The exact words Richard and Helen had said. "She's not our responsibility." Samantha had listened in stunned silence, then left the room for over an hour. When she returned, her face was different. Hardened, resolved. Surgery was scheduled the next morning. Danielle stayed late again. "They don't know who you are," she whispered, brushing a curl from Avery's forehead. "But they will." She leaned closer. "You just hold on." The next day, as the gurney rolled toward the operating room, Avery heard it. The click of wheels, the hum of fluorescent lights overhead, the subtle shift of hands adjusting her IV. She was terrified. But somewhere deep in her fractured brain, she made a choice. She would live, not just survive, but live, and when she did, they would hear her. Not as a victim, not as an obligation, but as a woman who remembered everything and wasn't afraid to speak. Avery woke in stages. First came the light, piercing, indifferent, then the pain, deep, bone level, like her body was arguing with itself. And finally, the sound. Beeps, distant footsteps, the hiss of machines. But through it all, one voice stood steady. "Hey there," Danielle said gently. "You made it." Avery blinked, her eyes sluggish and unfocused, but that voice anchored her to reality. She was alive. Not okay, not yet, but alive. Within days, her progress shocked the staff. First a finger twitch, then a squeeze, and soon the first words rasped through a throat that felt like sandpaper. "Where am I?" Samantha was there for every milestone, notebook in hand, documenting everything, fighting off lawyers and reporters. "You're in good hands," she'd say, even when she looked like she hadn't slept in days. But recovery was not kind. The pain was constant. The rage, when she remembered, burned deeper. Her parents had left her, walked away from her hospital bed like she was a stranger, and then tried to take what wasn't theirs. The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was systemic. They hadn't just failed her as parents, they had planned to erase her from existence entirely. The lawyer, Mr. Langford, came on a Thursday, grey suit, tired eyes, voice calm as stone. He handed her a thick envelope. "This," he said, "was from your grandmother. She left it with me, in case anything happened before she could speak to you herself." Avery opened the letter that night, hands still weak from nerve damage. Inside, she found truth, heavy and undeniable. Her grandmother had known about the distance, about the silence, about the subtle cruelties that build up over years until they feel like fact. And then, a revelation. Avery wasn't just adopted by the Montgomerys. She was blood. Her biological mother had been her grandmother's niece, a girl who wasn't ready, who had trusted family to do right by her child. And still, they had failed. But not her grandmother. She'd left the house, the estate, the memories, the parts that mattered. And she'd left Avery something more powerful than wealth. Clarity. "You are my family," the letter ended, "not by circumstance, but by choice." And love. Avery didn't cry. Not that night. She just sat there, breathing shallowly, letter in her lap, and let the truth settle into her bones like armor. She wasn't alone. Not anymore. And not ever again. They arrived like vultures dressed for brunch, Helen in her signature cream trench coat, Richard checking his Rolex like he had somewhere better to be. Their black Mercedes idled in front of the inherited home, shining against the overcast Georgia sky. It had once been a place of warmth, of lavender candles and books stacked on every wooden table. Now, it was just another prize, another piece of legacy they felt entitled to collect. Jordan trailed behind them, quieter than usual. He hadn't spoken much since the accident. He hadn't even visited Avery in the hospital. But today, he came. Maybe for closure. Maybe for answers. "The key's not working," Richard muttered, jiggling the brass knob with growing irritation. "Try the back door," Helen offered, already glancing through the side window to spot which furniture was still in place. "I shouldn't have to enter through the back of my own mother's house," he snapped. Eventually a locksmith arrived, paid in cash, no questions asked, and the door opened with a reluctant creak. The air inside smelled like thyme, dust and rosewood. Helen stepped in first, eyes scanning like a museum appraiser. "Check if the silver is still in the dining hutch," she said sharply. But on the polished mahogany table, something waited. A single envelope, no ribbon, no dramatics. Just a name scrawled in her mother's familiar handwriting. "Avery," Jordan said quietly. "It's addressed to Avery." Helen's hand darted forward. "She's not here, is she?" She tore it open without hesitation, as if possession of paper equaled possession of power. She read the first paragraph, and her face drained of color. The second, and her hand began to tremble. By the time Richard grabbed it from her, the room had fallen into a chilling silence. "What is it?" Jordan asked. Richard didn't answer. He read fast, his eyes darting, his nostrils flaring, and then stopped suddenly, swallowing hard. "It's lies," he growled. "Fabricated." "Twisted." Jordan reached out. "Let me see." "No," Helen snapped, but it was too late. Jordan had already taken a photo of the open page with his phone. "She knows," he said, voice unsteady. "She remembers everything." And in the silence that followed, the sound of denial collapsed beneath the weight of proof. The house was not empty. Avery had been here. In voice, in presence, in resolve. And she'd left them exactly what they deserved. The truth, hand-delivered. Jordan stood in the foyer, the photo of the letter still glowing on his phone screen, his fingers clenched tight around the edges. For years, he'd accepted a version of family that felt uneven, but tolerable. Avery, his older sister, had always been more distant, more guarded. He thought it was just her nature. Now, he saw it differently. It wasn't distance, it was defense. "You told me it was a closed adoption," he said slowly, turning toward his parents. "That she wasn't really part of us, but you raised her. You let her believe she was your daughter." Richard exhaled like a man cornered. "We did what we thought was best for the family." "For the family?" Jordan's voice cracked. "You walked out on her. Left her to die because it was inconvenient. That's not family. That's cruelty." Helen stepped forward, voice silky with practiced regret. "Jordan, don't let her poison you. Avery's always resented us. This is just another performance." "A performance?" He shook his head in disbelief. "She was in a coma. And you were already filing paperwork to take her inheritance. Because she's not stable," Richard shot back. "She's emotionally erratic. She cut us off, Jordan. She turned her back on this family years ago." "She didn't turn her back," Jordan replied. "She was pushed." He turned the phone so they could see the video link embedded in the letter. A few taps, and their own voices filled the room. Avery had recorded everything. The conversation with the doctors, the refusal to authorize treatment, the cold dismissal. Helen covered her mouth. That's taken out of context." Jordan didn't blink. "You said, 'She's not our daughter. We owe her nothing.' That's not a slip of the tongue. That's who you are." The air grew heavy, dense with shame no one would name. And then Jordan said the one thing they couldn't spin. "I'm going to her," he said quietly. "I should have gone sooner." "Don't be dramatic," Richard barked. "We are still your parents." Jordan turned to him, eyes sharp. "And she's still my sister." He walked out the front door, leaving them in a silence that felt permanent. The kind that lingers long after the argument ends, not because there's nothing left to say, but because something sacred has already been broken. The courthouse was quieter than usual that morning. A grey drizzle slicked the stone steps, and reporters lingered under umbrellas like vultures waiting for movement. Inside, the air felt thick with anticipation, polished shoes echoing on marble, lawyers murmuring, and a judge flipping through case files with weary precision. Avery didn't appear in person. Her doctors had submitted a full report on her medical status, and her attorneys had filed a motion to represent her interests directly. What the Montgomerys didn't expect was that the motion had already been granted. The estate had been frozen, the conservatorship denied, and the judge had reviewed the footage. The footage. Richard shifted in his seat as the courtroom screen flickered to life. The audio crackled, and then came his own voice. Calm, composed, deliberate. "She's not our daughter. We owe her nothing." The room was silent. No one coughed. No one whispered. It was the kind of silence that comes when truth walks in, wearing a face no one can deny. Helen looked straight ahead, face pale, her fingers tight around the edge of the bench. Jordan sat in the back, alone, expression unreadable. The judge leaned forward, her voice measured. This court finds no basis to question the validity of the will, nor the mental competence of Miss Innes. Morgan. Richard stood suddenly. Your Honor, we contest the emotional manipulation. Sit down, Mr. Montgomery, the judge said flatly. You may be used to controlling the narrative, but not here. Outside, the press pounced the moment the decision was read. How do you respond to accusations of abandonment? Why did you contest your daughter's inheritance after disowning her? The Montgomerys shoved past cameras, Helen muttering no comment over and over, while Richard kept his head down like a man already planning a reframe. But it was too late. The footage went viral that night. Shared across platforms, dissected in comment sections, quoted in op-eds. Not because it was shocking, but because it was familiar. Too many people had felt the sting of conditional love. Too many had been discarded when they were no longer convenient. Avery's story struck a nerve, and the world noticed. And in a quiet house across the city, Avery watched the fallout unfold, not with triumph, but with release. The truth was no longer hers to carry alone. It had entered the world and done what truth always does. It revealed, it disrupted, and it refused to be ignored. The cafe was nearly empty when Jordan walked in. Just the hiss of the espresso machine and the clink of silverware in the kitchen. He spotted Avery immediately, seated by the window, sunlight outlining the soft curve of her jaw, the healing scar along her temple still pink. She looked smaller than he remembered, not weaker, just worn in a way life does to people who've carried too much for too long. He approached slowly, unsure of what to say. Hey, he offered, barely above a whisper. Avery didn't smile, but she didn't flinch either. She gestured to the seat across from her. You came. I should have come sooner, he said, sinking into the chair. I didn't know. You didn't ask, she replied, voice steady. Not cruel, just true. He nodded, the shame rising in his throat like static. I guess I believed them. Believed you were cold, distant. Angry for no reason. I was angry, she said, but not without reason. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. It was dense, necessary. He reached into his jacket and pulled out the letter. Her letter. The one their parents had read, the one that cracked open the lie. I read every word, he said. And then I watched the video, all of it. Avery met his eyes. And? I don't know how to unsee it, he admitted. How to go back to pretending they're who I thought they were. I've been defending people who never once defended you. She exhaled slowly, watching a car roll past outside. You were a kid. You needed to believe your parents were good. I still need family, he said, voice barely holding. But not if it means choosing a lie over a person. Avery didn't answer right away. She looked down at the coffee cup between her hands, then back up. I'm not the same girl you grew up with. I know, he said, but I'd like to know the woman you've become, if you'll let me. It wasn't a reunion. It wasn't redemption. It was a beginning, uneven, uncertain, but real. And for once, Avery didn't feel like she had to earn it. She simply had to allow it, one step at a time. It was a quiet Sunday evening when the house, her house, finally felt like home again. Avery stood at the stove, barefoot, stirring a pot of lentil stew, the scent of cumin and garlic curling through the air. Laughter echoed faintly from the living room, where Nurse Danielle was teaching Samantha how to play dominoes, and Jordan, her brother, was setting the table, carefully, like it mattered. This wasn't the family she was born into. It wasn't the one she had been assigned, but it was the one she had chosen, and the one that had chosen her back. When dinner was ready, they gathered around the long oak table once owned by her grandmother. There were mismatched plates, wine glasses filled with sparkling cider, and the kind of conversation that didn't tiptoe around pain, but didn't drown in it either. Samantha raised her glass first. "To Avery," she said, eyes shining. "For surviving what should have broken her, for reminding us that family isn't made in a hospital or a courthouse, but in moments like this." Avery smiled softly but said nothing. She didn't need to. Her presence, steady and sure, said everything. Later that night, after everyone had gone, Jordan lingered on the porch swing. Avery joined him, wrapping a light blanket over her legs. The crickets hummed in the hedges. The moon was high and indifferent. "Do you ever think about them?" he asked, not looking at her. "Sometimes," she replied, "but not with anger anymore, more like watching a storm roll past through a window. It's still loud, still real, but I'm safe now." Jordan nodded slowly. "I'm trying to forgive them, but I'm not sure I can." "That's not your job," she said gently. "Your only job is to be honest with yourself, and to be better than they were." He looked at her then, something unreadable in his eyes. "You are." They sat in silence, not needing to fill it. Fireflies blinked in the distance. The house behind them glowed with soft yellow light. Avery closed her eyes and breathed in deep. This was what healing felt like, not dramatic or final, but tender, earned, and still unfolding. And as the world spun on, she understood one simple truth. You can't choose where you come from, but you can choose where you grow, and who you grow with.